I was sitting in a quiet airport lounge last week, the kind of place where the overhead monitors are always tuned to a global news cycle. A major trade dispute had just broken out, and the scrolls across the bottom of the screen were frantic. "Washington is furious," one headline read. "Brussels remains defiant," said another. The anchor spoke with a practiced, breathless intensity, describing these nations as if they were giant, moody characters in a high-stakes drama, strategic, calculating, and prone to sudden outbursts of temper. Everyone in the lounge was staring up, nodding along to the spectacle of these invisible titans clashing over the Atlantic. It felt like watching a grand game of chess where the pieces were whole continents. But then I noticed a man sitting a few rows down. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was hunched over a calculator and a stack of shipping manifests, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. He looks less like a defiant nation, and more like someone whose small manufacturing business had just been erased by a single sentence uttered in a Mahogany Road office 3,000 miles away. That disconnect was jarring. On the screen, the United States and the European Union were having a heated argument, but in that lounge, there was just a man wondering if he'd have to lay off his staff by Monday. It was a perfect split-screen reality. One world filled with vibrant strategic abstractions, and another where the actual people, the ones who eat, sleep, and lose their livelihoods, had completely vanished from the narrative. It's a style of storytelling we've become so used to that we barely notice the erasure. We talk about Japan deciding or Iran responding as if these countries are singular organisms with one mind and one voice. But a state isn't a person. It's a massive, clanking machine of systems and contradictions. So why does the news insist on turning the world into a board game? Why do the humans disappear the moment the topic turns to international politics? And more importantly, who benefits when the story becomes this bloodless and abstract?
Wow, that is a incredibly striking image to start us off. That difference between the giant map on the wall and the actual territory on the ground is exactly what we are getting into today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here to unpack this.
Yeah.
We're so conditioned to just look at the map, right? We see the big red blocks and the big blue blocks pushing against each other.
Right.
But that guy in the lounge really highlighted what we miss. We miss the totally granular, messy reality of human life that is happening right underneath those massive geopolitical headlines.
The news treats these massive countries like they're just people having an argument. You hear things like, France is upset today.
Which is crazy when you think about it.
It is. But the actual human being, that man with his calculator, he becomes completely invisible. It's almost like a magic trick. You stare at the shiny object, the nation state, so you don't have to look at the incredibly complex human reality.
So today we are reversing that trick for you, the listener. We are completely ignoring the so-called titans and the grand chessboards.
We are putting the chess pieces away.
Absolutely. No State Department press releases, no summit photo ops. We are zooming all the way in on the individuals.
And we are going to explore this through three very specific lenses where that traditional state narrative completely hides what's actually happening to real people.
Right. We're going to look at how we connect culturally, how we're surviving massive demographic shifts, and how everyday people are actually building their livelihoods.
So if you came here hoping for buzzwords like soft power strategy or looking at GDP growth charts, you might want to pivot.
Yeah, definitely no charts today. Unless, of course, we can attach a real human face to those numbers.
Yeah.
We want to show you the actual mechanism of the world, not just the sanitized result.
Let's dive right into that first area then. Cultural connection.
Yes, because normally when I read about cultural exports in the media, it is framed as this highly strategic top-down initiative.
Like a national brand strategy.
Exactly. It always sounds like a bunch of executives in a boardroom making a calculated decision on how to deploy culture like a weapon.
Soft power projection.
Right. But I want to tell you a story I found about a young woman. Let's look at Minji.
Okay, it was Minji.
She is an illustrator. She lives in Seoul. And I stumbled across her story while digging into how digital art spreads.
Yeah.
She works out of this incredibly cramped, tiny studio apartment. You know, the kind where your bed is basically practically inside the kitchen?
Yeah, the classic micro apartment.
Right. And she was absolutely not trying to be some sort of cultural ambassador.
She wasn't getting memos from the Ministry of Culture.
She was just drawing these little, highly personal webtoons about her everyday life.
What kind of things was she drawing?
Really grounded stuff. About her burnout at work, the intense pressure she felt to succeed, or just the very quiet, solitary joy of eating one of those triangular kimbaps from a 7-Eleven at 2 in the morning.
So hyper-specific and very vulnerable.
Interesting. Thousands of miles away, in Marseille, France, There's a university student named Lucas.
Okay.
And Lucas just randomly found her work online.
Did he speak Korean?
Not a single word. But something in those digital drawings, the way she drew the slumped posture of her character, the sheer exhaustion, those tiny moments of late-night relief, it just clicked for him.
It transcended the language barrier.
Completely. So he started using translation apps just to figure out what her captions meant. And then he got so invested, he actually started teaching himself Korean.
Just for a webtoon?
Just so he could read her unreleased drafts before they got translated. And eventually, he even organized a fan meetup for her work right there in Marseille.
Just dedicated to her specific illustration.
And that is the point. This is not some calculated national brand strategy. Lucas didn't fall in love with the Republic of South Korea.
He fell in love with Minji's honesty.
Exactly. It wasn't a nation he connected with, it was a person. And I think that is the massive missing link in how we talk about global influence today.
These digital threads that connect people are incredibly messy. They're personal.
And they build a kind of organic diplomacy that an official embassy could literally never manufacture.
You've hit on something so crucial there, the messiness. Well, traditional state diplomacy is clean. It's treaties, it's formal handshakes, it's very strict protocol.
People in suits reading from binders.
Exactly. But what you are describing with Minji and Lucas is entirely organic. And it's exactly what we see happening on a massive global scale with East Asian pop culture.
You mean like the K-pop explosion?
Look at BTS and their absolutely massive global fandom known as the ARMY.
I mean, I see the headlines about them constantly, but it is always framed as a business story. BTS breaks another revenue record, or K-pop conquers the charts.
There's that state narrative again, Korea conquers the world.
Right.
But if you actually dive into the academic research done on these communities, and I was reading this fascinating paper specifically titled Labor of Love, you quickly realize this is not passive consumption.
Passive consumption meaning just buying an album, listening to it.
Right. These fans are not just sitting around streaming music. They're actively working.
Working? Like what kind of work?
Actual organized labor. Think about the language barrier you just mentioned with Lucas in France.
Yeah, he had to use apps.
Well, in the early days of K-pop going global, the entertainment companies did not provide English subtitles for everything, let alone Spanish or Arabic.
So how did it spread?
The fans did the work. You have these massive, highly organized, decentralized networks of translators.
You mean just regular fans translating video content?
Yes. Fans who are bilingual acting as a real-time global translation infrastructure. A new video drops in Seoul, and within literal minutes, these fan networks have generated accurate subtitles in 30 different languages.
And they are definitely not getting paid for this.
Not a dime. They are doing it out of pure passion because they want to share a message that resonated with them. They are bridging a massive gap that the state or the corporation couldn't figure out how to bridge.
Incredible.
And it goes way beyond just translation. Think about promotion. Have you ever walked through Times Square recently?
Yeah, it's hard to miss the giant digital billboards.
You see those massive 10-story ads celebrating a K-pop idol's birthday or an album anniversary.
Yeah, I always just assumed that was the record label throwing their marketing budget around.
A lot of people assume that. No.
Really?
Really, that is the fans pooling their own money.
Their own money for a billboard in Times Square.
Their lunch money, their part-time wages, their savings, they crowdfund to buy advertising space in literally the most expensive media market on the planet.
So they're basically acting as an unpaid, highly motivated PR agency.
Exactly.
That totally changes how I look at those screens now. It's not a corporation pushing a product on me.
Yeah.
It's a grassroots community shouting, hey, look at this person we love.
It is a phenomenal display of bottom-up soft power. And it even extends into what researchers are now calling charity diplomacy.
Charity diplomacy.
Well, there's this amazing project called Star Forest.
Star Forest.
Yeah. Fans will globally coordinate and raise funds to plant literal physical forests in urban areas.
Wait, they plant trees.
To combat desertification, to improve local air quality, to help the environment. And they do it all in the name of their favorite artist to honor them.
So they are engaging in major environmental action on behalf of a pop star.
They are planting trees for the world, but the inspiration and the organizing hub is the artist.
Or look at disaster relief.
Okay. When that devastating earthquake and tsunami hit Japan years ago, fans of a Korean girl group called Karara Fans from 10 completely different countries immediately coordinated relief efforts.
Wow. They raised huge amounts of money and sent physical aid to Japan, explicitly doing it on behalf of the group.
That is actual, tangible foreign aid. But it is entirely bypassing the government apparatus. It is citizen-to-citizen diplomacy.
It creates what sociologists call a transcultural fandom.
Transcultural fandom.
Yes, it normalizes a foreign culture in a way that a government policy or a trade treaty never, ever could. Have you ever heard of cup sleeve events?
I think I've seen photos of them. It looks like a big party inside a local coffee shop. Exactly. It's a very specific social ritual that started in Korean fan culture.
How does it work?
You go to a designated cafe on a singer's birthday, you buy a drink, and the cafe gives you a custom-designed cardboard sleeve with the artist's face on it, plus little photo cards and stickers.
Sounds like a fun little localized thing.
It does, but now you have teenagers in Paris, in London, in small towns in Ohio organizing and attending these exact same events locally.
So you have a kid sitting in a cafe in the American Midwest, actively participating in a cultural ritual that originated in Seoul.
Exactly. They are physically inhabiting that cultural space.
That creates such a profound sense of belonging.
It does. The researchers talk a lot about the concept of oppa,
Which means older brother in Korean, right?
and it feeds into this idea of a parasocial relationship. Now, critics love to dismiss all of this as just teenage obsession or hysteria.
It's easy to write off.
But for so many of these individuals, it is an absolute lifeline. It provides a community, a shared purpose, and an identity that their immediate physical environment might not be giving them.
It's fascinating because if a state official was looking at this, they would probably only see it as tourism revenue.
And to be fair, that revenue is staggering.
Sure.
I was reading that roughly 7.6% of all of South Korea's international tourism is directly linked to BTS alone.
Wait, 7.6%?
Yes.
That is insane. That means almost 1 in every 13 tourists entering the country is there because of a band.
Again, 1 in 13 people landing at Incheon Airport is not there for a corporate conference or a generic sightseeing vacation.
They are there because they formed a deep, digital personal connection with a human being on a screen, and they wanted to see the soil they came from.
They want to walk the exact streets that Minji drew in her webtoon. They want to eat the convenience store food Lucas read about.
It's the Minji and Lucas story, but multiplied by millions of people. It creates this beautiful image of a massive web of people holding hands across borders while their respective governments are busy arguing and building walls.
A completely different layer of reality.
Because while the youth are building these incredible, vibrant digital bridges, there is another demographic in East Asia that is experiencing a very, very different human reality.
Right, the split screen effect again.
Exactly. We are going to move from the hyper-connected, noisy world of global fandom to the crushing, silent isolation of the aging population.
The vibrant digital world versus the quiet physical one.
So if you're listening, I want you to imagine for a moment that you are 80 years old.
Okay.
The city that you literally spent your life helping to build is now moving way faster than you can even walk. I was reading this deeply moving profile about a man, we'll just call him Mr. Watanabe.
Right.
He lives in one of those absolutely massive social housing complexes in the suburbs of Tokyo. You know, the ones just endless, identical rows of concrete balconies stretching into the distance.
Oh, the Danshi complexes. They were the ultimate symbol of a booming, modernizing economy back in the 60s and 70s.
Right. And for decades, Mr. Watanabe was the absolute hero of that national economic story.
He was the classic salaryman.
Exactly. He worked the grueling long hours, he commuted, he built the economic miracle, he did everything the state and society asked of him.
Oh.
Now, he is living in what urban planners are calling a limit village.
A limit village. Usually that term is for rural mountain towns that are dying out. Yeah.
This is a limit village located right inside the largest metropolis in the world.
Because all the young families have moved away to the newer city centers.
The concrete complex is just hauntingly quiet. And Mr. Watanabe told the reporter this story about his daily struggle with a new self-checkout machine at his local convenience store.
That is such a visceral, painful detail.
He goes in, he stands there holding a single carton of milk, and this glowing screen is beeping at him, asking him to tap a card, swipe an app, navigate menus.
And he just doesn't know how.
He just freezes. He told the reporter he feels like an error in the system.
Wow.
The government talks endlessly on the news about pension sustainability and managing demographic shifts.
Very clean, abstract terms.
Right. But for Mr. Watanabe, The daily reality is that he has simply been optimized out of existence. He is profoundly lonely. And that loneliness isn't just a sad feeling, it is a massive structural failure of the society.
Optimized out of existence. That is a chilling way to frame it, but it is entirely accurate. And when you look at the demographic data, it completely backs up his feeling of a world accelerating away from him.
So,
The sheer speed at which East Asia is aging is unlike anything we have ever seen in human history.
just how different is it from the aging we see in, say, Europe or North America?
Well, let's look at France for comparison.
Okay.
It took France over 100 years to transition from what demographers call an aging society to an aged society.
A full century.
That is 4 or 5 entire generations of time.
So they had time to adapt.
Exactly. You have 100 years to build nursing homes, to slowly adjust your national pension systems, to figure out healthcare.
And culturally, too, right?
Crucially, yes. The culture has a century to slowly adapt its norms to the reality of having a massive elderly population.
Okay, so France had 100 years. What about South Korea or China?
Well, 30 years.
30.
Yes.
That is literally a single generation.
Exactly. You are taking a century's worth of immense social and structural change and compressing it into the span of a single career.
That's why the infrastructure can't keep up. It's moving too fast.
The infrastructure can't keep up, and the traditional family structure is completely collapsing under the pressure. This leads to what economists and demographers refer to as the 4-2-1 problem.
I've come across this term in the sources. Walk me through the actual math of it, because when you think about it, it sounds totally impossible.
It is essentially the math of total exhaustion. So let's put you in the scenario.
Okay.
Imagine you are a 30-year-old man working in Shanghai right now.
I'm 30 in Shanghai.
Because of the historical one-child policy, or frankly just the modern reality of extremely low birth rates across the region, you have no siblings. You are an only child.
So I am the one in the 4-2-1.
Correct. Now, you have 2 parents who are just reaching retirement age. That is the 2.
Okay, so I'm responsible for this.
But they each have 2 parents who are still alive thanks to modern medicine.
Wow.
So you have 4 grandparents, likely in their late 80s or 90s. That is the 4.
Wait, so I am one single person, and I am solely responsible financially, medically, physically for 6 elderly adults.
Yes.
How is that even mathematically possible on one salary?
It's almost not. There are no aunts or uncles to help chip in. There are no brothers or sisters to take shifts at the hospital or share the financial load. All the pressure funnels down to the one.
And historically, in traditional East Asian culture, who was actually doing the day-to-day physical labor of caring for the elders?
It was almost entirely the family, and specifically the daughter-in-law.
Right, the unpaid domestic labor.
Exactly. It was a massive, unpaid labor force deeply embedded in the traditional family structure.
But that labor force is gone now.
Completely. Because of the modern pressures, women are working full-time. And due to the gender imbalance created by policies in previous decades, the phenomenon of the missing girls, that demographic of caregivers literally does not exist in the numbers needed.
So the one in the 4-2-1 is just being crushed.
Absolutely crushed under the weight of those obligations.
Which really makes you completely rethink the modern concept of independence.
So,
Well, I read this deeply fascinating story in the material about a young graphic designer living in Shanghai.
yes, the sovereignty story.
Yeah. He was eating a hot pot dinner completely alone in a restaurant. And he was actually celebrating it.
He was proud of it.
Very proud. He told the interviewer, "I am sovereign over my own life." He referred to his solitary life as a harbor.
A harbor.
Yeah. He felt he was safe in his harbor. He was free from his parents, constantly nagging him to get married. He was completely free from the crushing burden of the 4-2-1 problem.
He was entirely unburdened.
He's just a guy eating his meat, doing his graphic design work, answering to no one. And honestly, when I read it, part of me thought, good for him. Who doesn't want their own peaceful harbor?
It is a highly seductive image, especially if you are feeling overwhelmed by modern life.
Okay.
But the sociologist analyzing the piece countered his viewpoint with a completely different metaphor.
What was it?
He said, that young man's life is not a harbor. That is a canoe.
A canoe. Why a canoe?
Think about the physical difference. A harbor is permanent. It has deep concrete walls. It protects you from the storm, regardless of what happens.
Right.
The traditional extended family, for all of its suffocating obligations and endless drama and nagging, was a harbor.
If you got sick, someone was there.
Exactly. If you got sick, the family took you in. If you lost your job in an economic downturn, the family fed you. It was a deeply resilient human social contract.
A safety net literally made out of people.
Now, look at the designer eating his hot pot alone. He has traded away that resilient, albeit suffocating safety net for a purely contractual relationship with the free market.
So he's just out on the water alone.
He is in a canoe, paddling entirely alone in the open ocean. Now, as long as the weather is perfect, as long as he is young, he is healthy, and his design skills are highly employable, he feels incredibly free. He can steer that canoe wherever he wants.
But if a storm rolls in?
If he gets sick. Or, more inevitably, when he ages and becomes the next Mr. Watanabe.
The canoe tips over.
The canoe tips over, and there is nobody there to pull him out of the water. The free market does not care about him the second he stops being a productive worker or a paying consumer. He has no harbor.
It is the illusion of freedom, but it's freedom without a floor beneath you.
Exactly.
But the market is definitely trying to capitalize on all these people in their canoes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are seeing the rise of the loneliness economy.
Oh, it is a massive, booming industry. The market sees all these solitary people paddling their canoes and says, hey, let me sell you a more comfortable paddle.
I was looking at the hanbap trend in South Korea, the culture of eating alone, and specifically places like the Ichiran ramen chain. Have you seen how these specific restaurants are designed architecturally?
It is a fascinating study in spatial isolation.
It is literally designed to isolate you from human contact. Mm-hmm. You walk in and you buy a meal ticket from a vending machine so you don't even have to speak to a human cashier.
Total frictionless transactions.
And you go sit in a tiny booth. Mm-hmm. And it has solid wooden partitions on both your left and right sides. It looks exactly like a voting booth.
You can't see the diners next to you.
You can't see anyone. And in front of you, a little bamboo curtain rolls up and a pair of hands, literally just disembodied hands, slides your bowl of hot ramen towards you, and then the curtain drops back down. You never see a single human face during the entire experience.
It's remarkable. What they're doing is destigmatizing loneliness by fully institutionalizing it.
Right.
The restaurant is subtly telling you, you don't need friends or family to enjoy a meal. We have optimized the experience of eating alone.
It goes beyond food. Yeah. You have the explosion of co-living spaces for young professionals, which, when you first hear the word, sounds like it's building a community. But it's actually kind of weird.
It is highly commercialized community. You are paying a premium rent to essentially have friends available in a common room when you feel like it.
It's like treating friendship as a monthly subscription service.
Exactly. And for the elderly population, the market is offering digital companions.
Like apps.
Yes. Massive tech companies are rolling out customized apps. You have Baidu creating simplified voice-activated interfaces specifically for the elderly. You have Didi, the ride-sharing giant, offering special elderly ride-hailing services.
Yeah, replacing the family again.
Exactly. The unspoken message of the market is, you do not need a son or a daughter to drive you to your doctor's appointment. You can simply pay our platform to do it for you.
It's all part of what the sources call the access curve. We're systematically replacing human relationships with financial transactions. But does any of this actually solve the core problem of human isolation?
It doesn't solve the loneliness. It just manages the logistics of surviving alone.
So is there any real solution? Or are we just resigned to letting millions of people drift off in their individual canoes until they sink?
Well, there are alternative approaches. I was looking deeply into Singapore's response to this exact demographic crisis.
The Kampong Admiralty Project, I read about that. It sounded completely different from the Donchi complexes.
It is a fascinating, deliberate attempt by the state to reverse engineer the village concept back into an ultra-modern city.
Because Kampong literally translates to village. Yes.
The planners in Singapore realized that if you just warehouse elderly people in dedicated retirement towers away from the rest of society, they simply die of loneliness and cognitive decline.
So what did they build instead?
They built a massive, integrated, vertical village.
How does it actually work in a physical sense?
They radically mixed the civic functions. Instead of zoning things separately, they put a bustling childcare center right next door to the active aging hub for seniors.
Wait, literally right next to each other?
On the same floor, sharing common spaces, they intentionally refused to separate the generations. They engineered the architecture to force them to collide every single day.
So you walk through and you have grandpas hanging out with toddlers?
Yes. You have seniors volunteering their time to read stories, teach traditional crafts, or just play with the kids while the parents are at work.
Incredible.
It completely shifts the narrative. It gives the seniors a vital daily purpose. They are no longer viewed by society as just pension liabilities or a burden on the healthcare system. They are actively functioning as grandparents to the entire community.
And the kids get all that focused attention and generational wisdom.
Exactly. It is a very deliberate, state-funded attempt to rebuild the harbor using concrete architecture and clever policy.
Which is so desperately needed. Because the alternative to the harbor, the dark side of this isolation, is what is happening right now in Japan.
You are referring to Kodokushi.
Yes, the lonely deaths.
We really have to pause and reflect on this because the sheer numbers are they are immensely heavy.
To ground this in reality, in Tokyo alone, in a single year, over 2,200 people over the age of 65 died completely alone.
2,200 human beings.
And we are not talking about passing away peacefully in a hospital ward surrounded by nurses.
Oh.
We're talking about people dying alone in their tiny apartments and their bodies not being discovered for days or sometimes even weeks until a neighbor notices a smell while the landlord comes for rent.
It is the ultimate tragic consequence. They become the literal corpse that the evening news doesn't bother to report on because it doesn't fit the grand economic narrative.
I read about one specific case that just broke my heart. It was a family of 3.
I read that case too.
They literally died of starvation in their home.
In one of the wealthiest cities on earth.
Because they were simply too ashamed of their extreme poverty to reach out and ask the local government for welfare assistance. They just quietly withdrew from the world, closed their door, and vanished.
And that is the absolute devastating cost of the people-less narrative we started this conversation with. When a government or a society starts treating its population merely as an economy or a set of demographic statistics, actual human beings fall right through the cracks and disappear.
It really hammers home our core point today. The state is just a massive abstraction. Demographic shift is an abstraction, but the suffering is incredibly specific.
Yes.
It is happening in a specific room on a specific day to a very specific person.
And I think that perfectly leads us into our third and final story for this deep dive.
Right. We've talked about the youth aggressively connecting across borders, and we've talked about the elderly suffering in extreme isolation. Now we need to look at the people right in the middle.
The working age people, the ones simply trying to build a livelihood and feed their families.
Because this is the arena where the state narrative is usually the loudest and the most. Right. We constantly hear massive terms like the Belt and Road Initiative, global infrastructure strategy, great power competition.
It is always framed as a ruthless, high-stakes power play. You open a newspaper and it says, China is building a massive port in Africa to gain geopolitical influence.
Or the constant op-eds arguing, this new railway is actually a sinister debt trap. It brings us right back to the men in suits playing the board game of Risk.
But again, we are ignoring the board game today.
I want to introduce you, the listener, to a woman named Fatima.
Let's talk about Fatima. Where is she?
Fatima lives in a small, dusty town just outside of Mombasa down in Kenya. She's an entrepreneur. She runs a local poultry business.
Okay.
Now, before all these massive, multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects arrived, Fatima's entire daily life was defined by the sheer friction of distance.
Friction of distance. Explain what that means for her business.
Well, she had the chickens. She had a great supply of eggs. But physically getting those fragile eggs to the large markets in the capital city of Nairobi was a total nightmare.
Because of the infrastructure.
Right. The local roads were completely terrible, riddled with potholes. Hiring transport trucks was incredibly expensive and unreliable. So by the time she paid the driver, accounted for the eggs that broke along the bumpy journey, and finally sold her goods, her profit margin was basically wiped out to zero.
Economists call that the logistics tax on the poor. It keeps people trapped in local subsistence.
Exactly. But then a massive project arrives. The new standard gauge railway, the SGR.
A flagship Belt and Road project.
Right. And while the politicians in the West and the East are aggressively arguing about it in the media, debating debt to GDP ratios and spheres of geopolitical influence,
Fatima is completely ignoring the op-eds.
the Fatima doesn't care about the op-eds. She is looking at the tracks and she sees a train.
She sees a fast, reliable way to move her goods to the capital.
Much more than that, actually. She didn't just put her eggs on the train. She went out, she worked directly with the project engineers, she learned the logistics trade, and she actually secured a supply contract related to the railway operation.
Wow.
For her, this train was never a geopolitical maneuver. It was literally a college fund for her children. It was a tangible way to permanently expand her business out of her small town.
She took agency.
She wasn't some helpless pawn being moved around on a geopolitical chessboard. She was a working mother who saw a massive train stop in her town, and she climbed aboard to change her life.
And that story right there is the essence of the people-centric view of global development. It is so easy for us in the West to get totally obsessed with the mega projects, the giant hydroelectric dams, the massive suspension bridges, the shiny new skyscrapers.
Because they look great on a brochure.
But by focusing only on the concrete, we miss the actual evolving intent behind a lot of these newer international cooperation strategies.
What do you mean by evolving intent?
There is a highly documented shift happening right now in these development initiatives. They are moving away from just building massive landmarks and heavily focusing on what they officially call small and beautiful projects.
Small and beautiful. I have to admit, when I first read that in our research, it sounded more like a trendy gardening philosophy than a global economic strategy.
In a weird way, it shares some of that philosophy. It is all about hyper-targeted projects that have a relatively low financial cost, but yield an incredibly high immediate impact on individual daily lives.
Could you give me a tangible example of that?
Absolutely. Take something called Junkow technology.
Junkow. This is the mushroom thing, right?
Yes.
I have to be completely honest with you. When I was prepping for this deep dive and I saw mushroom grass in the notes, I thought to myself, okay, sure, that's nice for a local farm, but is it really world-changing development?
Now, it sounds incredibly mundane at first glance, but it is actually deceptively simple and brilliant. Jun literally means mushroom and cow means grass. Traditionally, if you are a farmer in a developing nation and you want to grow high-value cash crops like shiitake or oyster mushrooms, what do you need to grow them on?
I mean, I usually see them growing on dead wood or logs in the forest.
Exactly. You need chopped wood to create the substrate, which means to grow your crop, you have to go out and chop down local trees. In regions where severe deforestation and soil erosion are already creating environmental crises, cutting down more trees just to grow mushrooms is totally unsustainable.
So where did the grass come in?
Junkow is a very specific, specially bred type of tall herbaceous grass. It can grow incredibly tall very fast. It has deep roots that actively prevent soil erosion. But here's the absolute magic of it. You harvest this grass, you grind it down into a pulp, and it perfectly replaces wood logs as the substrate to grow those high-value mushrooms.
Wait, so you completely stop cutting down the local forests and you still get a premium cash crop?
Exactly. It solves an ecological problem and an economic problem simultaneously. But let's look at the actual human impact, because that's our focus. Look at what happened when they introduced this to Papua New Guinea.
Okay, what happened there?
The agricultural experts didn't just drop off a giant pallet of grass seeds at the port and fly home. They stayed. They went into the rural communities and physically trained the local households on how to cultivate and process the grass.
Hands-on training.
Yes, and the adoption rate was staggering. Over 8,600 individual households actively adopted this Junkow technology.
8,600 families.
And they didn't just grow mushrooms, they set a regional record for yield. Now, for a subsistence farmer living day-to-day in Papua New Guinea, this is not just an abstract economic statistic.
No, it's a total paradigm shift.
This is the literal difference between just barely getting by and finally getting ahead. It is actual cash money in their pocket next week.
It's immediate.
Completely immediate. It is totally distinct from a massive highway or a bridge that might take 12 years of disruptive construction before it provides any local benefit.
That immediately reminds me of the solar energy projects I was reading about in Mali, the ones they call the solar demonstration villages.
Yes. Another perfect example of a small and beautiful intervention.
It seems so incredibly simple. They are just bringing reliable solar light to highly remote, off-grid areas.
But think deeply about what that simple addition of light actually means for the daily routine of a human being living there.
It changes the clock. A child who previously couldn't see to read after 6 p.m. can now safely do their homework after the sun goes down.
Exactly. Education hours expand. Or think about the local economy. A small shopkeeper can now keep their store open and safely lit for 3 or 4 extra hours every night.
It literally extends the productive, safe waking hours of an entire community.
These are exactly the kind of small and beautiful interventions that the massive, screaming state strategy headlines always miss. The news anchor in the airport lounge is never going to report on a mushroom farmer in Papua New Guinea or a solar panel on a shop in Mali.
No, because it doesn't fit the dramatic board game narrative.
Hey.
Another initiative that really caught my eye in our research was the Lubin workshops.
Yes, the Lubin workshops.
This felt like a very direct, intentional counter to the old Western stereotype that international aid is just about giving a handout to poor countries.
It is entirely built around the philosophy of teaching a man to fish. They are named after Lu Ban, who was a legendary ancient Chinese master craftsman and inventor.
So the core philosophy is vocational training.
Yes, but I want to be very clear here. When we say vocational training, we are not just talking about handing someone a hammer and teaching them basic carpentry.
Yeah, I looked closely at the curriculum they are teaching at these workshops, and it is seriously intense.
It is extremely high-level, advanced technical training. If you look at the Lubin workshops they have set up in places like Ethiopia or across Indonesia,
How are they actually teaching?
they are outfitting these centers with state-of-the-art facilities, and they are teaching highly complex subjects: advanced mechatronics, industrial robotics programming, and practical artificial intelligence applications.
You have college-age students in Ethiopia who are actively learning how to program and maintain industrial manufacturing robots.
Yes, on the exact same cutting-edge machinery that is being used in modern global factories right now.
Phenomenal.
And the key metric here, the actual human metric we should care about, is employability. The data shows that the graduates from these Lubin programs are so highly skilled that they are often receiving lucrative job offers in their second or third year of study.
Wait, they're getting hired before they even finish the program.
Because they possess a tangible high-tech skill that the rapidly industrializing local market is absolutely desperate for.
It totally changes the life calculation for a young person. If you just give a community bags of food aid, they eat for a few weeks. But if you teach a young woman how to program an AI robotics assembly line,
You change her entire socioeconomic class trajectory.
you give her total agency.
Exactly. Agency is the perfect word. It is not charity, it is structural empowerment.
But let's zoom back out and look at the physical connectivity side of these massive initiatives again. I want to talk about the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor.
Okay, CPEC. That is usually the ultimate poster child for the grand geopolitical strategy narrative in the media.
It is a massive multi-billion-dollar corridor.
Right.
But if we zoom in way, way down from the satellite view and look specifically at the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province,
Right.
let's look at something as basic as the newly paved M1 motorway.
To a geopolitical strategist sitting in Washington or Brussels, that M1 motorway is just a line drawn on a map to connect point A to point B for strategic port access.
Right, but to a local Pakistani farmer driving a truck full of produce,
To that farmer, that smooth asphalt is literally a time saver. And in agriculture, time is quite literally money.
it's what I call the spoiled tomato factor.
Explain the spoiled tomato factor.
Okay, imagine you are that farmer. If the old dirt road is full of massive potholes and it takes you 6 excruciating hours of bouncing around to get your harvest to the main city market.
Your delicate tomatoes basically turn into liquid pasta sauce in the back of the truck before you even arrive.
Exactly. You lose half your inventory to bruising and spoilage. You take a massive financial hit.
But if that new M1 motorway is smoothly paved, and that exact same journey now only takes you 2 hours,
You arrive with fresh, pristine produce and you sell it at a premium price.
so the physical asphalt itself acts as an immediate economic multiplier for the little guy.
It massively increases the velocity of money moving around in that local rural economy.
Yes. And then you combine that improved road with the establishment of the Rashakai Special Economic Zone right there in the province.
The RSEZ.
They are currently projecting that this specific zone will create up to 70,000 direct local jobs.
70,000 jobs in one zone.
Now, even if they only hit half of that projection, imagine the structural impact on that province. You're fundamentally shifting a region from a fragmented, highly localized exchange, just people trading goods with their immediate neighbors, into a fully integrated, thriving regional commerce hub.
And beyond just the jobs, the social well-being metrics improve too. Better roads mean an ambulance can actually reach a rural hospital in time. It means kids can take a bus to a better school further away.
The local data actually reflects that. There was a reported 5.19% measurable improvement in overall community well-being simply due to the easier access to basic amenities that the roads provided.
But I do have to ask the skeptical question here just to keep us grounded. It all sounds incredibly positive, but is the reality on the ground really that smooth and frictionless? I mean, Fatima got her great logistics contract, but didn't other local people feel completely left out of the process? The research did mention some serious friction on the ground level.
That is a very fair point, and we have to be honest about the reality of development. There is absolutely friction.
How does that friction manifest?
Look, you simply cannot carve a massive modern railway through a rural landscape without disrupting something.
Right.
Locals very often feel completely left out of the initial planning stages. They wake up, they see the foreign surveyors in their fields, they see the massive concrete pillars going up, but nobody actually sat down with them to ask where the local station should be built.
So they feel like development is happening to them rather than happening with them.
Yes, there are legitimate environmental concerns about local habitats. There are issues regarding land displacement. It is messy.
It's the growing pains of rapid modernization.
Precisely. That is the inherent tension of all global development. But when the dust settles, for the young person who secures that high-tech job at the Lubin workshop, or the local trader who saves 4 hours of driving on the new motorway, the tangible human benefit is undeniable.
Right.
The true challenge for these people-centric development strategies moving forward is to actively reduce that initial friction. They need to ensure that the fandoms of the world are actually invited to the planning table from day one.
Because when they do get it right, it completely transforms lives.
Does.
So we have really traveled across the entire spectrum of human experience today. We started in a cramped apartment in Seoul with Minji, watching her send her deeply personal art out into the digital ether, only to form a profound connection with Lucas thousands of miles away in France.
A connection that bypassed the state entirely.
Then we sat in that silent, echoing concrete hallway in Tokyo with Mr. Watanabe, really feeling the crushing weight of an aging society that simply hasn't figured out how to care for him yet.
The man left behind by the economic miracle.
And finally, we stood on the railway platform in Kenya with Fatima, watching the arrival of a massive train that didn't bring a debt trap, but brought her a thriving business and a future for her kids.
3 extremely different lives, taking place on 3 very different continents.
But they are all intimately connected by the exact same underlying thread.
They are the actual breathing human reality that exists constantly beneath the blaring news headline.
When we finally strip away the grand geopolitical labels, when we stop saying Washington or Beijing or Brussels, when we stop abstracting things as the demographic crisis or the Belt and Road, what do we actually find?
We find people.
Just people.
We find everyday people trying desperately to connect with one another. We find people trying to survive the sheer speed of aging and modernization. And we find people just trying to build a slightly better livelihood for their children.
And realizing that profoundly changes how you have to consume the news going forward.
Yes.
If you were listening to this, the next time you look up at a monitor and see a frantic headline about a global trade war, don't picture a giant map of the world turning red and blue.
Picture the man sitting in the airport lounge, hunched over his calculator, sweating over his shipping manifests.
And when you read a sterile academic article about aging East Asian societies, don't just picture a line graph trending downwards.
Picture the empty chair at the hot pot restaurant or the silent self-checkout machine.
And when you read heated debates about global infrastructure and power projection, don't just see massive slabs of concrete and steel.
See the fresh tomatoes finally getting to the market intact. It makes this massive, intimidating world so much less abstract.
It creates a sense of a shared condition. We are all just individuals navigating these massive clanking systems. We're all just trying to find our own harbor, whether we find it in a global digital fan club, inside a carefully engineered vertical village, or by starting a new business along a railway line.
International politics becomes truly political again only when people return to the story. When the subject of global affairs is not only the state but also citizens, the world becomes less abstract and more human. And perhaps that is the moment when international politics stops being a distant spectacle and becomes, once again, something we recognize as our shared condition.